Hello everyone. We want to go through mathematics paper 1 2023. Yeah, so the first question here is what is solve for x? So just as a simple quadratic equation, and you have to solve for x squared minus 7x plus 12. And how do you solve these questions? I like to the simplest method is to use what I call sum and product. Of course, there's a quadratic formula which would obviously give you the same answers, but then there's a bit more computation involved there. So what you want to do is find two numbers whose sum is negative 7 and product is 12. Well, eventually after you have done these types of questions, you get to a point where this becomes second nature, and you can just see the numbers as you're working through them. It's not like like counting 1 2 3, but it involves a bit of thinking, but it becomes easier as you go through the questions. So you just think about I'd like to think about the sum my negative 7 there. What two numbers can I add to get negative 7? Of course, there's negative 6 and 1, there's negative 5 and negative 2, there's negative 3 and negative 4. Well, when I get to negative 3 and negative 4, I remind myself that these are factors of 12, and I can obviously see that these the numbers I'm looking for, they 3 and 4. So what I'll have then is x minus, the form you're looking for is x plus or minus a times x plus or minus b. This should be equal to 0. I should say just plus here. 3 doesn't matter, but that's the form you're looking for. So x, the first one is minus 3, second one minus 4. It can be interchanged, however, first one could be, that doesn't matter. When multiplication is commutative, what I mean by commutative is you can shift the terms you're multiplying around and you still get the same answer. So therefore your answer should be x is equal to 3, x is equal to 4. That's pretty simple. The next question we have is solving for x in that equation there. First thing you want to do here is simplify this. Simplify it preferably into a quadratic equation, because you can see there's two x terms here, and that means you obviously get a quadratic equation. So let's multiply this out. First thing, simplify. X times well, in this case, only in this case would you want to simplify. First simplify, because this is already the left hand side, which is the side, is already factored out. If you had the case where, let me just write down a hypothetical case. If you had the case where this was x, 3x plus 5 is equal to 0, then in this case you already have a factored equation, and you have a 0 on the right hand side of the equation, and you have a 0 on the right hand side of the equation. Then therefore that means that x should be equal to 0 and 3x plus 5 should be equal to 0. Then you can solve well, this is already in its form. Then x is equal to negative 5 over 3. So in this case, then you wouldn't have to simplify, you just solve directly. But in this case, we in the question we're solving, we have a 1 on the other side. So you want to simplify this into 3x squared, multiply this out. The x times 3 times 3x, x times 5. Then we have a 1 on the other side. When you take this one and move it this side, it becomes a negative 1. When I say move, of course that means adding a negative 1 on both sides, plus negative 1 on both sides. This cancels out to 0. That's what you have there. but I like to think of it as moving. When you move something on to the other side of the equal sign, you have to change the sign. Just think of it that way. If you have a plus c is equal to x, if you have to move this c this side, just change the sign and put it there. Change the sign and put it there. When you're moving something onto the other side of an equal sign, change the sign and put it there. You can think about it as adding, but that's just a roundabout way of doing it. Now, what we have here is a quadratic equation. And what you note with this quadratic equation is that the coefficient of the x squared term is 3. And that's not what we're used to dealing with when it comes to a simple factorization. And another important thing to note here, important thing to note here is that the question tells you that give your answer correct to 2 decimal places. What does this tell you about how you would solve this question? It tells you that the roots of the equation, the roots of the equation are not natural numbers. They are not integers, right? So you obviously, in this case, can conclude that the best way to solve this is through the quadratic formula. Just to recount the quadratic formula, negative b plus or minus root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, where you have to form, you're applying this quadratic formula to a form ax squared plus bx plus c. That's the form you're applying the quadratic formula to. Now let's just write that down here. If negative 5 positive or negative root of 5 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 1 all over 2 times 3. Now you want to simplify this. Just add just some grade 1 algebra here. Negative 5 plus or minus root of 25, 12 plus 12, 25 plus 12, that's 37 all over 6. Now you can get the answer to this just by punching it into a calculator. That should give you x is equal to 0.18 or x is equal to negative 1.85. Rounded off to 2 decimal places. Simple question. Now we move on to the next one. Question 1 is very simple. You just have to think about it a little bit and just go into solving. The next question is an inequality. An inequality, for all intents and purposes, can be solved similarly to an equation, just a simple equation with an equality sign in the middle. But then you have to take note of a few rules and regulations when it comes to these questions. The first rule, most importantly, is that when you multiply by a negative on both sides of the equality sign, the equality sign has to change and be the opposite of what it is. So if you have a greater than, you put a less than. If you have a less than, you put a greater than, or if you have a greater than or equal to, you put a less than or equal to, and so on. So I'll just write down rule number 1. If you multiply by a negative on both sides, then reverse or oppose the equality sign. Inequality. inequality sign. And you can see how this makes sense. For example, if you had 5 is greater than 2, 5 is greater than 2, and I multiply by a negative on both sides, right? I have usually when you multiply by a negative on both sides of an equality sign, when I say equality sign, I mean both sides of this sign here, the equation remains true, but not so for inequality signs. If I multiply by a negative on both sides, then you have negative 5 is greater than negative 2, which is not true. And therefore, you have to reverse this sign and put that. So this is wrong. When you multiply by negative on both sides, what you want to have is minus 5 less than minus 2. This is correct. That's one of the rules. The second rule is that inequalities are statements. What I mean by this is that an inequality means something. It tells you something about what you're solving. It actually means something. So when you read it with intent. Unlike an inequality sign can be, we don't really take note of how we read inequality signs. We just read them as they are given to us, and we don't really think much about them. And when we solve the questions, the equations, we don't think too much about what that means. But in this case, you have to think about it. For example, as we solve this, the first step you want to do is simplify this. X squared. Now let's move this to this side and this to this side. I say move, but you can also think about it as adding a positive 2x and a negative 15. So when you move, you change signs as well, as we did when we have equality signs. Minus 15 less than 0. So this is where the second rule comes in. Look at the statement and think about what it means. It's saying to you that this equation should always be less than 0 for all valid values of x. It should be less than 0. That's what that equation is telling you. So in order to solve this, you have to think about this as you solve it. Now let's just continue solving as we would a normal quadratic equation. Now we have 2 and 15 here. What I want to think about here is the sum and product, as I said previously. So sum and product. Sum and product. We have that there. Now, what two numbers can give me a sum of 2 and a product of negative 15? What are the factors of 15? Let me think of the factors of 15. Well, there's 3, yes. There's 5, yes. What's the difference between 3 and 5? It's 2. Oh, those are the numbers I'm looking for. So now let's work on how those numbers are arranged. We have a positive 2 and a negative 15. So you want the bigger number to be positive. X plus 5, the smaller number, to be negative. X 5 minus 3 is 2. 5 times negative 3 is negative 15, right? This is the factored inequality. Now we have the factored inequality. Now what we want to think of now is the equation that we're given, that we simplified in the beginning, x squared plus 2x minus 15. This is a quadratic equation. What does this tell us about the shape? The shape. You just want to think about the shape of the quadratic equation as you solve this. It's a quadratic equation and the x squared term is positive. What does that mean? It means that the quadratic equation has a a minimum point, a global minimum point. So in this case, we know the roots are -5. Let's just x is equal to -5 and x is equal to 3. Has a intersection point at -5. Intersection point, when I say intersection, I mean intersecting the x-axis. That's where the roots occur, and also at 3, +3. So now we have this, and we know that this function, the answer to this question, the question where is x squared plus 2x minus 15 less than 0, has to have an answer that is a range between this point and that point. So if you think about it, this function here has a minimum point of -15. When I say minimum point of -15, look at the equation, substitute x is equal to 0. When I say x is equal to 0, it's this point here. This point here, x is equal to 0 on the y-axis. This is the y-axis, this is the x-axis. On the y-axis, if I substitute x is equal to 0 here, I get -15. So at this point, this function is equal to -15 somewhere down here. -15. So what does the function look like? What should it look like? It should look something like this, right? So what was the question that they asked us? Where is this function less than 0? The function is less than 0 between -5 and 3. That's how you get your answer. Where is the function less than 0? It's less than 0 between the inequality sign that you use here, that you keep. This one, it does not say less than or equal to. It's not inclusive. So similarly, in your answer, don't include the boundaries. Do not include them. This will be wrong. Exclude the boundaries as is given in the question. So what you want to do there is note down your range. Your x is greater than -5, less than 3. This is the answer you're looking for. Now, you want to continue with your question 1.14. You want to continue with the question 1.14, which is also a very simple question. I think I'll do 1.14 and then stop the video and continue on the next one, just to keep these short. This one is very simple as well. The first step towards simplifying this, we do not want to work with any square roots or any radicals of sorts. So you want to simplify this by squaring the equation on both sides. Squaring the equation on both sides. If you square this just removes the square root. Then you have 2, 1 minus x should be equal to x squared minus 2x plus 1. If you're wondering how I simplified this, any function of the form ax plus b when squared is of the form ax squared plus 2ab x plus b squared. That's what you have there. So that's how I simplified it. It becomes second nature, or it becomes something at your fingertips once you keep on doing these questions over and over and over and over again. The main goal here is to be so familiar with these questions that you just do them as simply as possible. I just noted that I made a mistake here. Should be x is greater than -5 but less than x is greater than -5 but less than 3, which is this region here, this region here. That's what we're looking for. Okay. Okay, now continue with this. So we have we're here now, and we want to simplify this further. We'll just multiply this out and move it to the other side. We have 2 minus 2x is equal to x squared minus 2x plus 1. X squared, when you move this 2x to the other side, becomes positive 2x, cancels this 2x out, so we have no 2x. Move this 2 to the other side, becomes negative 1. Let me just write that down for you. So I'll add positive 2x here, this goes, and subtract a 2 here, this goes. Do the same thing on the other side. Positive 2x, subtract a 2, and that evaluates to x squared minus 1 should be equal to 0. What does that say then? This means that x squared is equal to 1. X is equal to square root of 1, and we know that the square root of 1 can be positive or negative 1. This then is your answer. I'll end this video here and continue on the next one.